3 big lies that the district attorney told you about Officer Rolfe. Will anarchists cause mayhem at the Trump rally in Tulsa? Dr. Fauci says no second lockdown needed. Facebook pulls Trump ads for being hateful. Fired for a Halloween costume 2 years ago? And is a rope on a tree a hate crime? That and more coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everyone. We have a jam-packed Friday for you. Thank you for being here. As always, an honor and a privilege to have you with me in what we call the Freedom Hut. This was stunning for me, at least yesterday. I'm surprised that this is not getting a whole lot more media coverage. We will discuss the upcoming rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend, and how there's a belief that there could be massive protests, riots. Remember, no one cares about protests. No one's worried about protests. This is just a question of whether there'll be a lot of folks who try to break the law. If people want to gather, if 100,000 crazy libs want to show up outside a Trump rally and hold up their signs and yell their stupid stuff about Russia collusion or, you know, Trump lied, babies died, or whatever it is, right? Whatever, you know, whose streets, our streets, whatever shouted idiocy will make them feel better about themselves. That's fine. I don't care. Trump doesn't care either. What he does care about, what everyone should care about, is are they breaking the law? Are they trying to use violence and the threat of violence to silence speech? Remember, one part of what's going on all across the country, and I think Republicans are waking up to the reality, and I mean powerful, elected Republicans, are waking up to the reality that they have been feeding the woke mob as though it were the crocodile that they were hoping would eat them last. And it turns out there's nobody else in the pond now. It's just the woke mob versus the rest of American society. Which team are you on? There's no middle ground. No, there's no concessions to make. There's no getting them to be reasonable. So I do think that there's been a wake-up call that has finally been answered, or at least is in the process of being answered with all of this. But we also have to remember that the acts of violence from the BLM movement, the acts of violence, the arson, the looting, and all of this, and just the mob mentality on display, that you will be shouted down, that they will shout epithets and slurs and viciousness at police officers. That's all meant as intimidation. The same reason, you know, that I can't go down to a rally with a Trump hat on and be physically safe. We all know that. I would be attacked. And they would say that I was provoking it or something. So there's always this looming threat of mob violence from these crowds because there has been violence from the crowds. They would say, oh, what about the Tea Party? Tea Party was peaceful. A perfect record of peacefulness at Tea Party rallies. And they were huge and they were across the country and it was a movement. Why would we excuse the mayhem, the looting, the arson, the assaults going on right now? Well, clearly we should not. We shouldn't excuse those things. We should, in fact, highlight them. We should make the left accountable for what they've done. But they do this on purpose. These rallies, these protests aren't just meant to shape the culture and the conversation. There's always an implied threat behind this. It's never just, is the left going to protest? It's, is the left going to protest and some faction thereof hit people with bricks, break windows, destroy things? Every time. Every time. That has its own power. These are the radicals from within the movement. They are not expelled by the movement. They are the vanguard. They are the shock troops of the left. They're the shock troops of the Democrat Party. That's what Antifa and the most radical BLM protesters who turn into rioters and looters, that is the purpose they serve. That is their role in all of this. So the peaceful or mostly peaceful protesters have a symbiotic relationship now with those who destroy, with those who threaten. That's why we have to get ready for this every time. You notice we don't do this. Conservatives, Republicans, we don't show up at, Joe Biden protests and threaten to destroy everything. Joe Biden rallies, rather, and threaten to destroy everything and act like a bunch of maniacs. There's no parity here. There's no a pox on both houses. There's no, this is a both sides whataboutism situation. No. So as we go into this weekend in Tulsa, where I'm hoping this will be the turning of the tide, that all of a sudden the Trump movement will awaken from what feels like an extended somnambulance. I think the Trump movement is about to awaken, and I'm very, very pleased. Well, I will be very pleased if, in fact, that's the case. I'll return to this anarchist plans at the Trump rally, and also that the Trump campaign has had ads taken down off of Facebook. That was a very interesting story that hit the wires, so to speak, yesterday. But I think the most important, if we're really just looking at the news cycle right now, other than the big political movement stuff that I was just discussing with you, I think the biggest bombshell of the last 24 hours is that we were told a lot of things by now let's shift our focus to Fulton County, Atlanta area, where we have these two police officers, Officer Rolfe, Officer Brosnan, who are charged with crimes. Officer Rolfe facing a possible death penalty statute. This was an outrage, a grotesque injustice, merely just the way that the press conference was run and the decisions made with the charges. This was an abomination. But we already have information that this has not gotten nearly the play that it should. No one seems as interested in this, and I'll walk you through why I think that is. Yesterday on MSNBC, and whoever thought that it was a good idea for one of these cops to go on MSNBC, I mean, this lawyer does not understand the political and media environment at all. Before we even get into this interview, where there were three major revelations that are assertions that essentially the district attorney lied to the American people, that this district attorney in Fulton County was not telling the truth. Paul Howard was lying to the American people. Well, but before we get to that, MSNBC, I mean, they went to Katie Tur, who is in no realm impressive at anything, but, does her job at MSNBC, and the executives there like her and whatever. Now we're supposed to listen to her. Doesn't know anything about anything. But she's already on a team here. She's on team BLM and destroy these two cops. That's been decided. There's no room at MSNBC for, hold on a second, let's give these cops a fair trial. Let's give them some actual due process in the pursuit of justice. No, that's not what MSNBC is going for. That's not the plan. It's bizarre to me that anybody could miss this. CNN and MSNBC are actively trying to brainwash the public to be a tainted jury pool against both of these officers. Remember, they both face criminal charges. This Officer Brosnan's facing a criminal charge because they say that he kicked the guy. Well, that comes into question here too. But I just want to put you through some of this interview because it's so illuminating. It's so illuminating when here a so-called TV journo has an opportunity to bring real information to the public, to tell people things that they should know, because this is the biggest national news story maybe the Supreme Court cases, but this is one of the biggest national news stories this week. It's gotten a tremendous amount of attention. A man's life, a police officer's life, truly hangs in the balance. It's not just, he'll have a bad life. He might not have a life if the mob left gets their way here. And I want to take you through some aspects of this interview, things that you need to know, you need to hear, because here is what comes across. MSNBC is an activist, might as well be the official channel along with CNN. They could both be the official channels of the BLM movement. And you are seeing that activism play out. They have picked sides. They do not want the truth. They are not looking for honesty. And I will show you. I will prove it to you with their own words.
That you are being hit with the assault charge because you stood on Mr. Brooks's shoulder while he lay dying.
If you look at the video, as Officer Brosnan approaches and Officer Rolfe is already there. He doesn't even know that Mr. Brooks has been shot at first. He doesn't even realize that first, Devin. And he goes up there and he's trying to figure out, is this scene secure? Is it safe? He knows that his taser has been taken from him. You can't see any blood at that point, to be overly graphic here. So he puts his foot, and he told the DA this, he puts his foot, he thought on his hand or on his arm, to make sure he couldn't get a weapon because he didn't know what the situation was. So literally for a matter of seconds, he puts his foot on his arm to make sure he can't grab a weapon. Then he realizes what's going on. He can see his taser is off to the side because it's got a flashlight on it, and he can see the taser. So he gets up, and Officer Brosnan goes and gets the taser, puts it in his holster. Other officers are now arriving within 50 seconds, and Officer Rolfe runs and gets his first aid kit. He was not standing on his shoulders. This description by the DA is completely belied by the video if you look at it. It's all on video. It's all on video. And the district attorney just kind of exaggerates this and makes it look like some terrible event where he's standing on his shoulders. It is preposterous, and it is not true. And all you got to do is look at the video, and it'll show that he didn't do anything like that. And they charge him with aggravated assault for that.
2 minutes is quite a long time.
It's not
when somebody isn't. The DA is saying it's 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. No. Can I know that was a long clip, but I wanted to hear that was the lawyer for Officer Brosnan, and this Katie Tur, who really, I don't want to be mean, but I have no idea. I don't know if her uncle is like one of the senior execs over at MSNBC or something. I don't know. I can't imagine they think this is the person that should be handling this interview for any reason. But I do want to just point out that she's given two bombshell pieces of information here and she's not being asked to take the word of this lawyer who clearly has a vested interest in his client and a narrative. We get that. But two bombshell pieces of information. One, that the representation of Officer Brosnan standing on the shoulder of, and I believe they also said kicked, but the representation of standing on the shoulder of in some kind of, trophy pose, which was really what was being implied by the DA, like, we got this guy. Horrific. That was completely untrue. The video shows it's untrue. Everyone has access to the video, and that the statement the DA made that it didn't take 2 minutes to get him made. It took 50 seconds, which when you're trying to secure the situation, understand if you're still under threat, you've got endorphin, blasting out of your eye sockets. Okay, your heart's pumping a million beats a minute. You're trying to figure out what's going on. Within 50 seconds, you've got cops coming in and they're giving this guy, and one of the officers is giving him CPR and saying, keep breathing for me, keep breathing for me, trying to keep this guy alive. And that was left out of the DA's press conference, that little bit of information, which would have shattered the narrative. The DA was trying to make this sound like it was a lynching by two white cops. That's what the DA was doing. That's why he used the language he did. That's why he talked about standing on the shoulders and having weird thoughts after they had shot him. Oh, what were those weird thoughts supposed to be? That's what was happening. Katie Tur is being handed a really worthwhile interview here. And notice how she sounds like the prosecution. Whoa, hold on. The DA says, check the tape, Katie. You don't think this is interesting?
And
he's wrong.
As somebody is he's wrong.
He's wrong. Look at the video.
It took less time to call.
He's wrong. Yeah, like the DA would ever be wrong. Yeah, I think this DA is clearly wrong. And anyone should be very suspect about a DA who's under investigation off primary to keep his job with tremendous pressure on him from the African-American community and the entirety of the Democratic Party to bring, the full brimstone and fire of hell upon this cop, no matter what the evidence is. A tremendous amount of pressure. And we're supposed to take their word for it? And we're supposed to take the word of the prosecutors here and not listen to the defense attorney?
Look at the videotape. There's a
Officer Brosnan,
videotape. There's a videotape that shows with a timestamp.
What was your impression? What was your impression of Mr. Brooks before the scuffle, before the?
This is so important. Okay, so we've already had two major, and she looks like, just like the DA clearly already told us all the true stuff, and you're totally lying. It's all on video. You don't have to take anyone's word for it. You should say, sir, we're going to go back and check that. Can we have you back on once we've checked to see what the video shows? Because the video is over 40 minutes long. Can't we? We'll have you back on. We'll fact check you on that. But tell us more. Give us more information. How long did it take? Who did he call? That's what a journalist would do. But she's not a journalist. She is a BLM activist with a news platform. Just like everybody else at MSNBC, CNN, the rest of the mainstream media, the New York Times, you name it. That's what's happening here. Notice as well how when she gets those two and there's a third one coming, two very critical pieces of information that he didn't just stand on his shoulders in some kind of bizarre celebratory pose, and you can see in the video, and that it didn't take 2 minutes to get him any aid. It took more like 50 seconds, less than half the time. You would think that there would be follow-up questions. Notice how she goes, this is not what we want, and transitions to what? A completely irrelevant line of questioning meant to bolster the BS politicized press conference that the Fulton County DA gave. What was Brooks like before the little thing about him trying to rescue you to the ground, take your taser, shoot you with it, and perhaps, and punch you in the face? You did that too. But before that, tell us how gentlemanly he was. Tell us what a great guy Rayshard Brooks was before he wrestled you and your partner to the ground, took your taser, shot you with it, punched you in the head. Tell us how great he was. Now, she's not clever enough to understand what happened. She's just doing what she's been programmed, meaning the news anchor here, Ms. Tur, programmed to do, which is give this audience what they want. Brooks good, cops bad. Brooks good, cops bad. That's all that matters. And then, you would sit here and say, for just forget about even professional integrity, for the clicks, because I don't think any of these journalists have that either, but for the clicks, for the notoriety, don't you want to take this interview and make it something that really blows up and gets attention? I'm giving it all this attention because, one, the information is important, not that she was eliciting it, but that the defense attorney is saying the DA's lying. And two, you're getting a clinic here on the propaganda mill that is MSNBC and how they do things. What do they sort of, you're saying the DA's lying. Let's talk about how great Brooks is as a guy before he tries to do that thing that was a little bit rough. All right, we got a little more of this interview that I want to share with you. This is from a sit-down on MSNBC with the lawyer for Officer Brosnan, who has the lesser charge, but still criminally charged here in the shooting of Rayshard Brooks. You have the lawyer, you have Officer Brosnan, and you have Katie Tur. And then she gives this question, which, this is straight off of like the Talking Points memo or Daily Kos, or I don't know which of those sites is closed. One of them has. But, one of these left-wing sites, the Nation, which is so woke over at thenation.com, that digital commie dumping site. Here you go. Here's the next question she's going to ask.
Did you put any consideration into allowing him to walk home to his sister's house? You had the guy's car, you had his car keys, you knew his name, you presumably saw his license. You could follow up. Was there any consideration given to allowing him to go home and then pursuing him later?
Why didn't you just let him go? Was there any consideration just letting him go? He was drunk driving and on parole. That's why they don't just let him go. People die from drunk driving every day in this country. They kill people from drunk driving every day in this country. And now, is drunk driving now like not a big deal? It wasn't like it was a .08 and, he was at a, .079 or something. The guy was clearly over, Oh, and I believe the DA said, it's just like a little bit drunk. No, he was clearly drunk. You watch the video, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know what street he's on. You want him driving home? But more to the point, do we enforce the law or not? Why didn't you just, hey, Mr. Police Officer, Katie Tur's asking, why didn't you just not enforce the law? Because that's not their job? Very stupid question. Stupid question. We need that Trump drop. Whenever we have MSNBC interviews, we've got to have a stupid question drop from Trump. But there's one more thing, and this is the other big lie that didn't come across in that clip I played you, but we have three big lies from the DA here, Paul Howard, Fulton County District Attorney, up for re-election, tight race, has some problems, corruption problems, harassment allegations, etc. We were all told in that press conference that the officer here, Officer Brosnan, had turned state's witness. Now, I initially said, look, this guy, the only reason he's doing that is because they're going to try to lock him away for, give him outrageous overcharging. Andy McCarthy, who wrote a fantastic piece on National Review on this, said it's not even right to call it overcharging. It's just unjust. I mean, they're making stuff up here to try to get these guys, meaning that they're conjuring ways to shoehorn even more charges than any reasonable person ever would just to make a point. But they told us that Officer Brosnan had turned state's evidence. This was in the press conference. You go back and watch it. That's not true. Charged APD officer did not agree to be state's witness in the Rayshard Brooks case. This is the CBS affiliate down in Atlanta. I mean, this is stunning. Officer Brosnan, quote, according to his attorney, has not agreed to testify. He has not agreed to plead guilty. He honestly told the DA's office everything that happened during a lengthy interview. He will continue to tell the DA or the GBI or any other investigator what happened, but he is absolutely not guilty of any crime and will not plead guilty and has not agreed to be a state's witness. That's a bombshell. I mean, how does the DA get that wrong? That's not a detail you get wrong. That's a detail you lie about. That's something that you rush out there to tell people, to create a perception, to add to pressure to get a certain outcome. That's not a mistake. That's not something that just happens. There's absolute clarity in this. Understand that there would have been negotiations with the lawyer. They would have wanted something in writing. But this was all rushed through as fast as possible. This is all politics. I'm going to tell you something right now. Officer Brosnan is very likely. I mean, first of all, if I'm him, I'm assuming if they try to bring charges against him, because he's now saying he's not tested. And doesn't that also make more sense now? So because you were thinking, wow, we were told that they kicked Brooks, stood on him, were showing a lack of respect for his human life for other reasons, as the DA was alluding to, after they shot him, didn't give him aid. Here's what we had that we could all see. What led up to the incident, the cops were perfect. Okay? What led up to Rayshard Brooks broke the law, was on parole for other crimes, got a 7-year sentence for violent domestic abuse, including against children. Only served a year because everyone's in prison forever for just having one joint on them, one marijuana cigarette, right? That's what we're always told. Oh, somebody had a dime bag on them and they got 20 years. That's not what happens. I'm not saying it never happens, but that's not what's happening in the prison system. So the lead up to the violent exchange, the officers are in the clear. The violent exchange itself, I think the officers have a very strong defense. So what does this guy do? What does the DA do in order to really stack the deck against them? Creates this whole narrative after the shooting to suggest that these guys, because otherwise, why? Where's the motive here? These two cops, they just decided they're going to put their own lives in jeopardy, probably ruin their lives, even if they end up being found not guilty of all charges, I would note. I mean, these guys are never going to be able to go back to their old life. They wanted to kill this guy because of racial animus. Is that what we're supposed to believe? That they just decided, yeah, we're going to kill this guy. We don't like him because we're racists. That is what That is the implication of all the different assertions and the BLM movement out there and the racist cops and we demand justice. Otherwise, this was just a very unfortunate series of incidents instigated by the suspect, Rayshard Brooks, for which he is ultimately responsible. Now, that doesn't mean that the man should have died, but it also means that the people that were defending themselves, in this case, these law enforcement officers, are not criminally responsible. That is what it means. But there was this whole narrative creation after the incident. Stood on him, kicked him, showed indifference to him, did not give him aid. And one cop had already turned on the other. You turn on your partner? Whew, that's going to be a very tough case. Think about how much our perception, none of that's true. None of that's, you think the defense attorney's going to go out there and say, oh, it's all on video, folks. No one's asking you to take the guy's word for it. And now I think about the relationship. Now the district attorney's going to say, hey, I know we lied about you turning state's evidence against your partner, but, how about we do that now? Of course not. Of course not. Why didn't he wait for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which is supposed to look at exactly this kind of conduct, to conduct their investigation? And they didn't even get a heads up about the press conference. He rammed this through as fast as he could to get what he wanted here. This is Mike Nifong going after the Duke lacrosse kids all over again. Remember that case? Nifong just kept pushing it, went with it, didn't do any due diligence, didn't care that the accuser, who went on to kill a man with a knife, by the way, and they never charged her with a criminal false complaint. Maybe they should have. Crystal Mangum was her name. I still remember this case very well. The Duke lacrosse kids were accused of this vicious gang rape of an exotic dancer at a party. All a lie. All a lie. She's accusing. They only use Duke lacrosse kids in the lineup. So, of course, they're going to get a Duke lacrosse. I mean, the whole thing was a scam, a sham. One of the kids that she claims is raping her, they have on an ATM camera 3 miles away when it's supposed to be happening. Had left, was on his way home, was getting money, nothing to do with it. But Mike Nifong, a white Democrat prosecutor in Durham, North Carolina, decided that he was going to he could finish off these kids. He could Mike Flynn him, if you would. You know what they've done to Mike Flynn, General Flynn. Put so much pressure so early on that you have no choice but to just break and allow them to get away with it because you're terrified and there's so much happening. They're coming at you with everything they've got before you can even pull together a defense. And it becomes, do you want your life to be ruined or do you want your life to end effectively? That's what's happening to this cop. This is a grotesque injustice. And you'll see, let's see who has real backbone on this one, because there's going to be a lot of heat over this case. And I'm seeing a lot of Republicans that have gotten weak very quickly. You know, there are people out there who were very opposed to Trump, maybe even called Trump an idiot on their radio show, which some of us never forget. And there are people out there who said stuff like that and then just rode that Trump train as hard as they could as long as Trump was delivering victories. They want to be on the winning team, right? Oh, yeah. Now things are tough. Now the polls are going against them. Now the political pressure is intense. People are getting deplatformed, getting canceled, getting fired, getting threatened in ways they haven't seen in a long time. Who is standing tall? Who is standing with their shield high? Pay very close attention to it, my friends, because those are the people you should be supporting, and those are the people you should be listening to. Not those who are the fair weather wartime conservatives, or just not wartime conservatives at all. Because right now we are in an ideological war, and our justice system is a front line of this battle. Just as we thought they would, the protesters, the domestic terrorists of Antifa, the left-wing lunatics, they have come for the founding fathers as expected, as predicted, including here on this show. I told you it would happen. Protesters in Portland, this is from my friend Raheem Kassam, lit a U.S. flag on fire and draped it around a George Washington statue that they... On the side of the fallen statue, they scrawled 1619, which is the name of the New York Times project to cancel 1776 as America's founding. Oh, that's right. The 1619 project, full of historical inaccuracies, a total misrepresentation of U.S. history, but meant to undermine the entire American project and have it remade in the image of wokeness and social justice, whatever that means. Marxism, really. These are Marxists. We are in the midst of a Marxist revolution, my friends. Just remember that. They won't call it Marxism. That's what's happening. That is the end goal that they seek, a society in which the only way to achieve true equality is to make people unequal by law, but put the enlightened elites at the very top of the pyramid to determine who gets what and when. Doesn't that sound a bit like Marxism to you? Yes, it does. Yes, it does indeed. But they came for Washington, just as we knew they would. And this is why, to cave to the mob on these issues, as I've said to you, I can't have an issue with a community deciding that they want to, in a fashion that is within order and the rule of law, change a statue, remove a statue. You know, I'm not the statue police, but also I don't believe in people taking it upon themselves because they're angry to destroy public property, whether it's writing BLM on federal buildings in D.C. with graffiti or destroying statues that have sat there for a very long time. George Washington statue getting pulled down. Do you think that this will be discussed in any detail on CNN tonight? Do you think that the New York Times and other major lib outlets, remember the New York Times is providing the rallying cry for these rioting maniacs. Does anyone think that the Times would cover this on their front page? It's not on it right now. Tensions grow over masks in the U.S. Ah, that's right. Masks. You know why? Because masks are being used as a political tool and a tool of suppression. There are so many places in the country where masks are unnecessary, including anywhere outdoors. But now there's this fight, and we'll return to this. The lockdown 2.0 fight is upon us, just as the election season is really kicking into gear. Just as Trump is going to start rallies, just as all this is happening, we're hearing about coronavirus again. Did we hear much about coronavirus while there were thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of protesters, looters, rioters, and assorted maniacs on the streets chanting for an end to policing, defund the cops? No, coronavirus went on holiday, it seems, during that. Coronavirus got scared of the protesters. It must have been hiding somewhere. Here we are now, as expected, seeing the return of the coronavirus pandemic panic, right when it is most useful for the Democrats. And when all the lessons that we've been able to learn over the last month or two based on the data that we've seen, that it is overwhelmingly only a risk to a certain set of the population, people that are over 70. Everyone else is at a relatively low risk. We don't even know if we're ever going to get a vaccine, folks. What are we going to do? Live in terror forever? We're all going to walk around with masks on constantly. We're going to sleep with them, shower with them. We're going to do all this crazy crap because the libs demand it? No. Nope. Not on my watch. So here we are now with the statues of the founders going. Why would they stop at the statues? They're not going to. But this is a reminder that those who are believing concessions should be made, let's sign an executive order on policing. Let's have Republicans put forward a police reform bill. No, that's not what they should have done. That was the wrong move, the wrong approach. In response to what's going on here, Republicans should have said, you know what, we're going to have hearings to talk about the destruction of communities, what the looting and rioting has done to small businesses, particularly in minority neighborhoods. Let's have hearings about what this means long term for real estate values and the school system in these areas. It's going to help or is it going to hurt? We have 40 plus million Americans out of jobs, and a lot of them haven't yet figured out that they're not going back to their job because it's not going to be there. As long as these different restrictions are in place, the old economic models that these businesses relied on aren't functioning, will not function. So we're going to have mass unemployment. We have an economy that has to get up and running, or we're going to have even more civil unrest. And there are maniacs who are focusing on tearing down statues. They're going to tear down a Washington statue. Guess what? They're going to have to rename Washington, D.C. next. If you think they won't try, and Washington State and Washington University, all of it. They're trying to erase our history, my friends. That's what's happening.